only do we have the toxicity screening test, we have the genetic test, and now we've got the mold analysis. We have very comprehensive information that this person has this specific amount of toxin. So then when we start to address the problem, which we'll talk about in part 4, what we do when we address the problem, then we can retest to make sure that the toxins are getting out of their body efficiently. But at that same time, we want to evaluate the home with that home mold test, the ERMI test, as I mentioned, because if the home has exposure and we're addressing these problems and they're still breathing in every single day, how well is that person going to get? They're not. And the good news is when you do a whole home remediation treatment, if it's needed, it's very cost effective, very inexpensive, and very easy to do. Sometimes you may be able to do it yourself without even having a professional come out. So very efficient and easy. But you can start to see how we can really get this real clear picture of what's really going on so we can hone in on the specific toxin. Now with MARCONs, this is a little bit different. Most of us have been familiar maybe with like a flu analysis, or these days it's now COVID testing. So we can use a nasal swab because MARCONs typically isolates itself in the nasal passages. So nasal swab into one nostril and the other one, and then we can send it to the lab to see if it's a positive or not. With MARCONs, it's pretty easy. It's either yes or no. There's no in between. There's no gradient at all. It's yes or no situation. And again, we would do that test based upon the genetic susceptibility. If that came back, we would look at that type of thing. Because with the genetic testing, we could have mold, MARCONs, or Lyme disease, but then we can also see something called multiple, right? So multiple could be all of them. So we have to make sure we know exactly what they are. We see a lot of our current practice members that have both, and we're handling those right now. And then Lyme, the same thing. Typically Lyme would be something we would address after we've handled everything else on the biotoxin list here. So the last thing that we handle, and a lot of our practice members don't have Lyme. It's not a common thing that we address in the office, but we have protocols that can help with that. And we have a series of individuals that are dealing with it that didn't even know they had it because they hadn't had the right testing. And so there's the common test that is ran through things like LabCorp, which is called the Western blot. It's not that great. It has a high error rate. So we use a much more advanced type testing where we can see, it's a blood test where we can see not only if they have a positive Lyme, but if there's positive co-infections that are associated with the Lyme, because that has to be addressed. The co-infections and the Lyme components together have to be addressed to make sure we really impact the body and get them feeling better. My page started to rip here. Sorry about that. On our heavy metals test here. I don't have to rip anymore. There we go. So with our heavy metals, we can look at things a little bit differently. So we have the toxins, the biotoxins, which can be done through urine analysis for the mold, the MARCONs, which is a nasal swab, and then we have the that Lyme, which is a blood test, a very comprehensive, specialized blood test that we can use that's very specific to Lyme. Now we look at heavy metals. Again, heavy metals exposures can happen from something from previously in the past. We know things like paint in the past used to be, there used to be lead in there. People were exposed to that, specific toys. And we still see occasionally from time to time people being exposed to water. And the same thing with cadmium. Then one of the most common ways we see people being exposed is through smoking cigarettes. So either you are a smoker, you previously were a smoker, you lived in a home with a smoker, maybe a family's, grandparents, aunts and uncles, you were exposed to smoking either through secondhand smoke or you ingested it yourself. Cadmium is also another big category there. Mercury, we all know that we can get it from environmental factors like from our oceans and from our fish and our waters as well. But we can also get it from an inorganic source, which is our cavities, amalgams. Not too long ago, dentists used to use mercury fillings, and oftentimes people still have these today, and they can start to leach and start getting into their body more specifically. And arsenic, rice. I mean, this is a huge issue. I mean, I talked about this in part 2 as well, but recently there was a recall for a children's cereal that had rice because it has high amounts of elements of arsenic. So oftentimes we see people who are gluten-free or they eat a lot of rice and they're exposed to these types of toxins and don't even know it, and they're just building up inside their body. So when you're doing a comprehensive test. There's two ways of analyzing for heavy metals. Well, I guess there's three ways. There's the traditional way where they do a push through something called DMSA to try to help push these toxins out of your body to see what your body is dealing with. Now we can use a much more less invasive, if you will. So instead of having to use some sort of treatment to see what the body is dealing with, it's a less invasive. We can do a comprehensive blood test, hair sample, and urine. And the reason why we can do, or a combination of both, so we can just do blood only if we're looking for certain types of metals. So oftentimes I will just do a blood only, and if I start to see elevated, say mercury, for example, because mercury it gets detoxified through hair and through urine, then we'll do it more advanced to see which level has more toxic levels, the hair or the urine, which are going to be specific to organic or inorganic. So we can address that appropriately. Because if the person has amalgams or cavities with mercury and they've got elevated inorganic mercury into their body, they need to get those removed, and they have to be removed specifically by a biological dentist. I talked about that in part 2. So that's really important to understand exactly the type of metals you're dealing with so that we can address them appropriately. And so once we know specifically what type of metals that we're dealing with through our blood work, hair, or urine sample, then we can use specific protocols to address these issues and to help the body get rid of it more effectively rather than just trying to push it out like some other treatments and techniques out there. And then, so we can also talk about the environmental as well. There's lots of testing that can be done to find out what type of toxins we have. There's things like glyphosate that we can look at, and pesticides, herbicides, things that our body's exposed to. But typically when you're dealing with these other types of toxins, these are also going to be in there. So oftentimes I won't even do like heavily advanced testing when I already see these as problems, the heavy metals or biotoxins, because they're much more damaging to the body and can cause a lot of chaos. These can cause a lot of chaos as well, but the reason why they do is because the body has the inability to get rid of it. And the inability to detoxify, here we go, the inability to detoxify keeps things in. You can't get it out. So hopefully this video today gives you a little bit more information on how I evaluate and to find out specifically the type of toxins. We talked about the biotoxins and the different ways to evaluate to find out the specific toxin we're dealing with. We talked about heavy metal load, and we talked about the environmental options as well, and how they impact the body and how we can actually evaluate for them to really see exactly what the problem is. We never want to assume anything. We want to know specifics. So what's going to happen is on my next video, I'm going to talk about some of the protocols and things that we do to help you get rid of these toxins and help you function more optimally and prepare you for future exposures to help you reduce the risk of it being problematic for you. So if this video was worth your time today, I would ask you to post in the comments that it was helpful, that it was valuable. It really helps me understand that I'm giving you good value here. Like our page. It's really important you like our page so you can be involved in our next live videos when I do live videos. And then also make sure if you go to our YouTube page, which is my name, Jason Shumard. So it's Jason, Shumard, Shumard, the letter D, the letter C. So Jason Shumard, DC. You can check out all of my videos on there that I've been doing, patient testimonials, just try to put out as much value as possible for you guys. If there's any questions that you have during this video that came up, please post them in the comments and I'll make sure I respond back. And if you want to find out more about how we do this and what we do to help individuals that have toxins and how that can be impacting their health, and we see it impacting and increasing the risk of diabetes, thyroid problems, autoimmune conditions, and cognitive decline, please reach out to us and you can set up a virtual consultation with me one-on-one. We can meet, talk more about your situation, and then discuss what needs to be done to discover your specific problems and how to put together a customized solution for you. All right, so I'll make sure I put into the comments our contact information. You can reach out anytime, contact our staff, and they can set you up with a one-on-one consultation. If there's anything that I can do, any questions that I can answer, please post them in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you guys on my next video.